Hey everyone, welcome to the Buster Bunch Intro to Range Guide. Today, we'll be covering the basics of range in 4 categories: gear and perks, passive boosts, permanent unlocks, and ability rotations. Starting off with the weapons, range has 2 pathways to choose from: bows and crossbows. Crossbows used to be the meta with the use of Hydrix and Ruby Bolts, but with the recent addition of Elder Arrows, bows have become the current recommended weapon of choice. As for armor, with the extremely low cost of tier 90 Serenic sets, it's the best armor in comparison due to its price. The damage difference between tier 90 and tier 92 Serenic is only 0.3%, but the upkeep cost is 8 to 9 times more for the elite version, making tier 90 the optimal choice. For gloves, if the boss is poisonable, use Cinderbanes. If not, use Nightmare Gauntlets. If you can't make use of the Nightmare Gauntlets passive, you can use the Death Touch Bracelet instead. And for boots, there's really only fleeting that go into that slot, and you don't need to worry about upgrading them to their spike counterpart because the damage increase really isn't much. The range skill cape increases the chance of your bolts proccing, which greatly boosts damage when you're using crossbows. If you're not using bolts, your cape slot should be filled with an Igneous Kiln cape, which reduces the cost of Deadshot and increases its damage. If you haven't gotten it yet, a kiln should be just fine. As for rings, if your weapon of choice is a bow, use a Stalker's Ring, which can be upgraded with an enchantment of Shadow. Otherwise, use a Reaver's Ring or a Ring of Death if your accuracy is low. For the amulet slot, use the best amulet that you have until you can get an Essence of Finality with a Dark Bow inside. It's a good early DPS boost since the Dark spec provides an easy Adren dump, and as you gain more funds, you'll be able to add more EOFs to your arsenal like an SGB and ECB EOF. We'll go more into detail on those specs later on in the guide. With the addition of the new arrows, there's a lot of ammo to choose from, so we'll quickly go over the main arrows to use. Jazz arrows increase the damage dealt to demons or dragons depending on the variant by 30% and increase your hit chance by 20%. They're ideal for fighting bosses of those types. Bic arrows increase the poison damage the target takes by 2% per stack up to a maximum of 200 stacks or 400% poison damage. These arrows are best in slot if the target's poisonable and the fight lasts more than 2 to 3 minutes. Full arrows increase the damage dealt by 15%, but reduce your accuracy by 10%, making them the next best arrow to use as long as your hit chance doesn't dip below 100%. When arrows generate icy chill stacks on the target when casting basics, and you can use those stacks when casting a threshold as it increases its damage and accuracy by 2% per stack, or 3% if you use an ultimate ability. These arrows should only be used if none of the previous arrows are applicable. Despore arrows increase crit chance by 3% and gain a feasting spore stack on every critical hit. After you get 5 stacks, they're consumed, granting you a buff which makes your next range ability cause 0% adrenaline. These arrows can be incorporated into rotations with crit builds to cast free death swiftnesses, but should not be your main ammo type. Blackstone arrows reduce the target's armor rating by 0.75% per stack up to 15%, or 20 stacks. This is a critical arrow to use on bosses with high defense such as Telos, AOD, and Beastmaster, and the debuff lasts 12 minutes, so you can swap off the arrow once you reach maximum stacks. As you can see, there's no ammo that's best for every scenario, so refer to this table courtesy of the PVM encyclopedia when choosing your ammunition for specific bosses. Arethodor's Grimoire is the best range pocket slot when using Despore, Full, or Jazz arrows. Next are the Scriptures of Jazz and Full. Otherwise, with the other ammo types, the Scripture of Full provides the best damage increase followed by a Grim, Jazz, then Scrimshaw of Cruelty. On to perks. We'll separate them into 2 categories: basic and advanced. At 99 Archaeology, the recommended relics are as follows: Fury of the Small, granting all basic abilities plus 1 base adrenaline generation; Berserker's Fury, providing a damage increase of up to 5.5% depending on how low your HP is; and Font of Life, increasing your health by 500. At 120 Archaeology, the recommended relics are going to be Fury of the Small, Conservation of Energy, refunds 10% adrenaline after any ultimate, and Death Ward, reduces damage taken by up to 10%. The best aura for range is Reckless. It provides a 10% damage increase outside of Death Swiftness, 4 during Death Swiftness, and 20% accuracy boost. It has by far the highest damage boost, but at the cost of taking 10% more damage. Next is Inspiration, which increases the base adren gain from abilities by 0.5%. Then we have Majorat, which has a flat 5% damage boost. And lastly, their Supreme Invigorate aura, which restores 10% adrenaline after ultimate abilities. If Reckless is on cooldown and your hit chance is below 100%, consider using Supreme Sharpshooter for accuracy. When you're using Big Arrows, Vampirism Aura is surprisingly a great DPS increase through proccing more poison hits with a Blood Reaver familiar. Speaking of familiars, Rippers with Spiritual Prayer Potions are the way to go unless the target's poisonable. In that case, Blood Reavers provide similar, if not better DPS than a Ripper when provided with extra healing effects, as every time the player heals, the Reaver hits the target, which has a chance to proc poison. For crit builds, Calgarian Demons are also a very good option. Avoid using Yaks unless absolutely necessary, like for hard mode Zuck and such. Let's talk about unlocking abilities now. The most important ability to unlock for ranged is Greater Ricochet. It has the highest damage output for a basic when paired with a Corroming Switch, and also applies 7 arrow stacks. Corruption Shot also has a very high ability percent damage on a single target, but really shines in AoE scenarios. It's a highly recommended ability to unlock early on due to its low cost. Greater Dazing Shot is a superior version of Dazing Shot, and it's important to get this from Shattered Worlds ASAP, as it's a core aspect of the range rotations. Greater Death Swiftness extends the duration of Death Swiftness to 38 seconds, just like a Planted Feet switch. If you don't have a Planted Feet switch, or aren't willing to use one, this is a high priority ability to get. Desolation provides at most a 2% damage boost over Anguish, which means it's best left as one of the last upgrades due to the high costs of Appraisal Codexes. A really important item to unlock is the passive Vigor from the Extinction Quest. It refunds 10% of your ultimate and spec adren costs. Moving on to specs, here are a range of special attacks. Darkbow. The Darkbow spec costs 65% adrenaline and fires 2 shots, dealing a total of 300 to 657% damage. It's a great adrenaline dump, but falls out of favor compared to the next specs, which provide more damage at a lower adrenaline cost. ECB spec. It requires 25% adrenaline for 15 seconds, and Soul Split no longer heals you, but deals 4 times the amount of healing you would have gotten as damage to your target. Since Soul Split has diminishing returns on high hits, abilities like Rapid Fire and Corruption Shot will benefit more than abilities with a single large hit like Snipe. The damage increase is significant, especially for the low adren cost, therefore should be activated as soon as possible. Please note that once activated from an EOF, if you switch weapons, the spec is cancelled, so plan accordingly. The SGB spec launches up to 5 arrows at the target at the cost of 30% adrenaline. The first will always have an opportunity to hit, while hit chance on the rest varies depending on the size of the target. For example, a 1x1 target has an average hit rate of 1 out of 1 arrows, while a 9x9 target has an average hit rate of 4 arrows. If the target's blocked, meaning you can't walk under it, such as Glacor, P5 Telos, or Sitting Zuck, the expected number of arrows to land is greatly increased. And when deciding on which spec to get first, remember, the SGB spec is just a lot stronger on larger bosses than smaller ones. A good ability rotation maximizes average ability damage over time. In simpler words, prioritize the abilities that do the most damage, and take into consideration adren use and cooldowns. For ranged, if you don't have Greater Ricochet unlocked, this is done by following this basic pattern. You start off with Dazing Shot, which is the foundation of your rotation, followed by 2 abilities, and then repeat. If you do have Gricko unlocked, however, prioritize the use of that ability, and then use the highest damaging abilities available afterwards. Here's the range abilities ranked by damage during and outside of Death Swiftness. You don't need to memorize all of them, just know which ones deal more damage and which ones to avoid. Now that we have the basics down, let's talk about ultimate rotations. Range revolves around Death Swiftness as it boosts all ability damage except bleeds by 50%. This is a huge increase, which is why you want to activate Death Swiftness as soon as it goes off cooldown or every 60 seconds. You can think of your overall rotation as 2 repeating cycles. 38 seconds inside Swiftness, 22 seconds out, repeat. While Death Swiftness is on cooldown, you need to manage your adrenaline by balancing your basics and thresholds so you reach 100% as soon as Death Swiftness is ready. Improper timing of Death Swiftness will result in damage decrease throughout the remainder of the fight. Death Swiftness rotations vary a lot based on your gear and random adren procs, so we'll go over a few scenarios before going into detail on a specific rotation. If you don't have any specs, you should fit 2 rapid fires, 2 snapshots, a shadow tendrils, and a flanking tight bindings into a Death Swiftness. Once you get a SGB, you can replace the tight bindings with the SGB spec and activate it once or twice depending on your adren pot cooldown. Since the SGB spec has a long cooldown of 30 seconds, the first activation should be early on in the rotation so that the second one can benefit from the Death Swiftness as well. Adding in the ECB to the rotation, you should be using 2 ECB specs, 2 SGB specs, 2 rapid fires, and 1 snapshot within Death Swiftness while using both an adren pot and limitless. To bypass the adren decrease, swap to a crossbow with Hydric bolts for a quick Gricko before swapping back to your main bow. Hydric's bolts have a chance to grant adrenaline on hit. Since the swap cancels your ECB spec, it's really preferred to use it before using the ECB spec or as it ends. Now let's see what a rotation looks like in practice with both ECB and SGB specs. If you're missing any of those switches, just ignore them and refer to the previously mentioned scenarios. We'll start off by casting Death Swiftness while throwing a Vuln Bomb and drinking an adren pot. You can either switch to crossbows for a Hydrix Gricko or use a basic before activating the ECB spec. Follow that with an SGB, then some basics, and a rapid fire when possible with the ECB spec still running. And as the spec timer ends, you can swap to your crossbow for a Hydrix Gricko or use any basic and cast the ECB spec again when possible with your bow equipped. Follow that by casting a snapshot, tendrils if your adren permits it, rapid fire, and finish the rotation off with a second SGB spec. Your adrenaline may not exactly match mine in the previous clip, so add basics and use limitless when needed, and dump adren if you get relentless procs. Well, that's all for the Buster Bunch Intro to Range Guide. We hope you enjoyed the content and find it helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, or just generally enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a comment so we can get back to you. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you in the next.